Hi, my name is Miriam, and this is the Black TV Show podcast. This is where I talk about my favorite TV show episodes, currently talking about season 2 of The Cosby Show. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 46, The Cosby Show season 2, episode 23, The Card Game. This episode aired April 10th, 1986. We start off looking over the Brooklyn Bridge. We usually don't get that kind of setup in terms of an established shot. Usually it's like the house, either during the day or at night, but we see like a sunset over the Brooklyn Bridge. And we see Cliff and Claire are in the kitchen with the professor, Dr. Foster. This is their professor in college. And Cliff is trying to remember this poem that he can't remember. All he says is, she walks, she walks, she walks, you know. And Claire says, let the girl sit, you know, let the woman sit. And, you know, he's like, she walks, you know, she walks. And Claire asks Dr. Foster, like, when is his lecture tomorrow at Rutgers? And he's like, oh, at 3 p.m. And Claire was like, I think you need to call them to let them know that you're going to be running late, because until Cliff gets this poem right. And he keeps saying, she walks, she walks, she walks, but he's just wrong. And he couldn't remember. He literally went on to sing Little Mary Had a Little Lamb kind of thing. So he was like totally off. And so Cliff tells Mr. Foster to say what grade he got in Dr. Foster's class. I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't think any of my professors in university would remember my grades, let alone me. I don't even remember some of my grades in certain classes I took. So like the fact that, how does a professor remember that? Like, was the class size less than like 15? Because like the class sizes I was in were like a class size of 200 students. So it's like, how would they remember your grade? Like clearly this professor is like a good friend of Cliff and Claire, and so he has a good relationship, but like to remember the grade is crazy. So Cliff got a A in the class, and then Cliff asks Dr. Foster to say Claire's grade, and he's like, I can't. Students' grades are confidential. That is true. That is true to this day. You're not allowed to tell someone else's grade. A prof would get in trouble for doing that. But Cliff said it anyway because he knew what the answer was. It is a B. and so Claire was like, you know, you might got the A. And all of a sudden she says,
well, Cliff, you may have received an A, but she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denied.
She remembered the whole poem. And I love how I always tell you guys on every episode, I just love how Felicia Rashad talks. It's just, she has the voice, like her voice is just amazing. And when she recites this poem, she does an amazing job. And so the phone rings, and it's Cliff's partner for the game, Pinnacle. And he says that he's sick with the flu and he can't play tonight. Good choice to not come, because now we know with COVID, you know, everyone's so back in the day, I swear, just the culture of working in the film industry is that even if you're sick, you still keep working. Like, you just have to push through. I remember there was a movie I worked on, that actually recently came out this year, and half the crew got sick with I forgot what the virus was, but it's like a stomach flu, and like it's for me, I just couldn't stop throwing up. I threw up like for hours on end, and to the point where I had to go to the hospital because I was throwing up the acid coming from my stomach, because usually when I get sick I do throw up, but never to the extent where I'm throwing up acid, because that really scared me, because it tastes nasty and I'm like, this is not good for my teeth, all that stuff. So it was very bad, and like, as I said, half the crew got it, and at first people were like, oh, I'll push through, and people finally, the medic that was on our crew, she was like, you got to go home. And even like some of the actors got sick, and it was a bad thing. And this was like a few months before COVID, so it was just like crazy to think about it. But now we're encouraged, like, if you're sick, you don't need to go to work, because especially now with COVID, it's like you don't want to infect the whole crew, even though everyone's now wearing masks. But yeah, so when I think about these situations, when they talk about the flu, there's gonna be an episode about like a whole episode in, I believe, season 3 about getting the flu. So, and that will be a fun episode to talk about based on what we've experienced in the last year. And so, by the way, so I didn't know what Pinnacle was, so I had to look that up. It's a trick-tacting ace 10 card game, typically for 2 to 4 players and played with a 48 card deck. It is derived from the card game Benziel. I don't know how to say it. It's Bezique. Players score points by trick-tacting and also by forming combinations of cards into medals. I don't know how to say that word either. Played by 4 people as a partnership or 3 as an individual. So that's what I got from Pinnacle. They do talk about Pinnacle a few times throughout the series, but I've never played it. Let me know if you've played Pinnacle before. I don't know if it's like an older game or if people currently are still playing the game. I want to hear from you guys if you guys still play Pinnacle. And so it's basically what usually happens is once a month, Russell and his friend Homer come and destroy Cliff and Chuck. This is the way that Claire is explaining it. And they have not won a single game in the last 5 years. And the Dr. Prosper was like, I would love to play against those kind of players. And Cliff says when they win, they scrape the head, and they also cheat. And so we end the conversation right there, and we go to Vanessa, where she brought home mail, and Vanessa sees a package for Theo, and Rudy was like, open it. First of all, it by law, if you receive mail that's named under someone else's name, you are legally not allowed to open it. I learned about that. I don't know when I learned about this, but it's maybe actually, never mind. I just realized I learned that from the Cosby Show. I'm like trying to think. I'm like, when did I learn that? There's an episode where Claire talks about like legally you can't open. See, this show gives you lessons, okay? It really teaches you life lessons. So basically, Vanessa can't open Theo's package unless Theo is there present to open it. And so Vanessa tries to hear if there's any noise. There's no noise. There's no smell from the mail. And then Rudy was like, drop it. And Vanessa's like, I'm not going to drop it. And so Rudy was like, hey, I'll take it. And so she takes it and she's about to drop it. And Theo was like, is that package for me? And she was like, yeah. And then so he takes it out of her hand and says, it's none of your business knowing what the package is. He goes into his bedroom. And Denise comes in to return a hat. But then she noticed like there's a box on his table. So she's like, what is that? And Theo says he bought a ring for Tanya, which is like it seemed like they're dating each other, but they're not together by the way that they're explaining this. And Denise looks at it, and she could tell it's fake. She could tell it's not expensive. And he asked for her opinion, and like how much she would pay for this, and she was like, I actually don't know how much this would pay, not sure. And Theo was like, it is $19.95, and she was like, did you get this from a TV commercial? And he was like, yeah. And Denise points this out, like, these are not real diamonds. And Theo was like, they're popular in Europe, and now they came to US for us. And Denise says, Tanya is not going to like it. And these are Diamondoids. Never heard of them. Of course, this is probably a name that they made up for the show because, sometimes with copyrights, they have to make up things that are not real. And we go back to the kitchen where Cliff and Dr. Foster are talking, and Cliff says, we need to figure out our signal. And Roscoe, who plays Dr. Foster, I just love how he talks. It's just amazing. So he's like, I'm not cheating.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
You want to win?
Yes, but fairly and squarely.
And Cliff says, like, do you want to win? He's like, yeah, I want to win, but fairly. And he'd rather lose as a gentleman. And Cliff says, then you will get the rest of your hair rubbed off. Because, he has like a bald spot on his head. And so Theo comes in and, says hi to Dr. Foster and talks to Cliff and says, can I show you something? And so they go into the living room and he shows the ring that he wants to give to Tanya. And he says, I need your honest opinion. Cliff looks at the Diamondoids and says, it looks 1995. And he was like, how do you know? And he's like, it's Diamondoids. I saw it on the commercial. And Theo was like, you watch wrestling? And he's like, no, I didn't watch wrestling. I was watching an old movie at like 4 a.m. and it came up. And so Theo, so Cliff asks like what the ring is for. Is it for her birthday? Is it for Christmas? And Theo was like, no, I bought it for friendship. And Cliff says, she might want another friend. And so Cliff says to Theo, like, bring Tanya to watch wrestling. And during the commercial, if she sees the ad and she says it's nice, then give her the ring. And so the doorbell rings and it's Russell and Homer coming into the house to play Pinnacle. Russell and Homer says they're going to be rubbing Cliff's head tonight. So Cliff mentions that Chuck has the flu and he will not be coming over. And so Russell's like, okay, well, we'll play cutthroat. It'll be all individual. And Cliff was like, no, I have a partner, okay? I have Dr. Foster. He's the head of English at Hillman. And, Russell's happy because it's a Hillman man. And so Russell says he likes to play for fun. Like, we're going to have fun with this guy. Doesn't matter if we win or lose. And Cliff and Dr. Foster, because at this point Dr. Foster comes into the room, they go backwards and they're like lightning, because they're trying to trick their way into the game. So Russell tells Homer about Dr. Foster as fresh meat. And we end Act 1 there, and we go into Act 2, and the guys are playing and, saying weird things. They trick their way by saying, we're at the diamond field, I went to the clubhouse, all those kind of words to figure out what kind of cards they're going to use. And Claire comes down with Rudy and says, I'm taking out the girls for ice cream. Do you guys want ice cream for the winners? And Russell and Homer already answers the question that they automatically know that they're going to win, so they're going to get the ice cream. And so she's like, okay, and she leaves. And Dr. Foster asks like a bunch of questions to clarify how they play the game.
Gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to ask a question. Do you usually play straight partners, cutthroat, or double-deck auction with a widow?
Straight partners.
A standard scoring of the Midwest check system.
Just what is the Midwest check system?
And like Russell and Homer are like, this guy is good. That's literally how they're seeing it. And so we go to the steps of outside the house with Tanya and Theo. And as I said, we've seen this set now a few times. I feel like this was a set built just for season 2 because I don't think we're going to see this kind of set in the future seasons. But they really are using it a lot because I think now this is the 4th episode. I could be mistaken, but I think this is the 4th episode that they use this outside set of the house, the steps. And they're both just sitting there, Tanya's reading her book and Theo asks her a bunch of questions. Theo asked her a question if she watches wrestling and she's like, I don't like wrestling. And Theo says, oh, he hasn't seen any. And so then Theo was like, so I haven't seen anyone except for you, And we cut back to the game of the Pinnacle. and Russell and Homer are doing weird things. Yet again, Homer puts the card on his head. They're talking about, the weather at the baseball game. Dr. Foster ends up having the winning card, and Russell and Homer look at them and they're like, ooh. And Cliff says, you cheated and you lied, and at the turn of this trick, the score is now tied. This poetry, I love it. I don't know, it's so funny the way that I like how they really incorporated literature into this episode. And so we cut back to outside with Theo and Tanya, and Theo's reading a book, and Theo's like, I'm not here to read a book. I wanted to give you something, but I'm he's basically afraid to give it to her because, everyone's saying, it looks cheap. And so Theo is about to give her the ring, and all of a sudden Claire and the girls are back from ice cream, and they all say hi to Tanya, and finally Rudy, being the last one, tries to sit with Tanya, and Vanessa's like, get into the house, okay? And so Tanya was like, okay, so what do you need to give me? And so he gives her the ring, and she loves it. She's like, it's beautiful. And he's like, your finger might turn green, you might not like it. And she's like, I will wear it every day. And Theo is happy about it. And so he's about to try to give her a kiss, but Rudy comes out with her ice cream and interrupts, and so their kiss doesn't happen. And Theo calls for Claire, and Claire was like, get in this house. And finally they get to kiss, and we go back to the game, and Homer and Russell are mad at each other because they're not getting the right cards, and they're cheating, but yet they're not working together well. And Cliff and Dr. Foster ends up winning the game, so they get to rub Homer and Russell's heads. And Homer says this is a stupid tradition, and Cliff says, yeah, but it's fun. I didn't get it because they didn't really rub the guy's head. I would shake shake out their head to the way that they rubbed it. I was just when Dr. Foster did it to Homer, he just pat his head, and then when Cliff did Russell, he just smoothed down his head. It didn't look like a bad thing. So I don't know why this was a big deal. Let me know from your opinion. It just didn't seem if I was rubbing someone's head, I would shake it to the point where they're uncomfortable, where Russell ends up doing that to Cliff. And so then we end that scene, and we cut to the living room where Cliff and Russell are eating ice cream, and Cliff tells Russell that he's fortunate to have him as a son because Russell gets to eat the winner's ice cream, because technically the winners were supposed to get the ice cream, but Russell did not win. And so Cliff says he didn't even know that Dr. Foster can play Pinnacle, and Russell's like, it's just, how does that just happen that he ends up the night that we play that he's at the house? And yeah, well, he didn't know that he played well, and he was over there for dinner, so that's just the case. And so Theo comes in from, I guess his little date with Tanya. They talk about how Cliff gave Theo the talk, and Theo says he'll be as much of a gentleman as Cliff was at his age. And Russell's like, oh, then I might have to give Theo the talk again, because I guess, technically Cliff is not a gentleman. And so we end the episode right there. So we had a few guest stars on this episode. We had Earl Hyman as Russell Huxtable, as usual. We have Roscoe Lee Browne. He plays Dr. Foster. We will see him in a few episodes of A Different World, of course. He really portrays as a English teacher, or English prof. And apparently he did had some time where he did do some teaching. But he, I would think that he is, if I was in his class, I wouldn't think he's an actor. I would think, he's my actual English teacher. But I would probably so fail in his class because I hate taking English class. And so then he's been in The Proud Family, 227, Soap. For this episode, Roscoe garnered an Emmy nomination for himself. So that's good for a guest star. That's good to hear that he was able to get an Emmy nomination for this role. and for this episode. And then we have Bill Gunn. He is a playwright. He's the one that plays Homer. He's a novelist. He's had 19 acting credits. But he's mostly a playwright. And this was actually, I believe he's in another episode of he's in the third season, but The Cosby Show is his second last credit. He did die from brain disease at the age of 59 in 1989. And the last guest star would be Tanya Wright, who plays Tanya. You see this happening a few times now where the actor that's playing the character has the same name. I feel like she was the girl from the hood from New York that came off the street and they gave her a role. I feel like that's the case. She's in one more episode in the third season. I believe the episode is Man Talk. I remember her clearly in that episode. But this is her first credit. And as I said, the Cosby Show seems like they get people from the streets to come and do some acting. But this led her to do a successful life in acting. Beverly Hills 90210, Living Single as her name Tanya also, Family Matters, The Jamie Foxx Show, the movie The Brothers, and True Blood. And I also want to note that Sabrina LaBeouf does not appear in this episode, even though she is in the credits. And so the lesson for this episode is never be too cocky in a game because you might lose. That's not the ultimate lesson I feel like from this episode. And the question I have for you guys is, are you competitive when playing games? I do get competitive, but when I know I'm gonna lose, I give up. I just give up. It's pretty sad. But I have friends that are very competitive. Like they cannot lose. It's crazy. So let me know using the hashtag card game at Twitter and Instagram at Black TV Shows Pod. And the next episode is episode 47, The Cosby Show Season 2, episode 24, Off to the Races. I will see you all on the next one.